This is part 3 of a 7-part series on continuing the conversation about the proposed rewrite of Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Bylaws. In part 3, we will search for a unifying theme, tying together the changes in all of the sections of Article 2.
I've got another viewpoint about the Article 2 rewrite I want to offer. At General Assembly last June, an amendment to the Article 2 rewrite was proposed that would add gratitude as another value. I appreciated the intent. The amendment suggested that we needed some joy in our values. But the Article 2 Study Commission opposed adding gratitude as a value. Their reasoning really got me to look at the whole rewrite in a different way. The Commission representative said that if we are truly grateful, we will show that in our generosity. If we are grateful, according to the dictate in the new generosity value, we will freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Otherwise, according to the Commission, being grateful is just an exercise in gross individualism. This is one of the more explicit attacks on us as individuals that we have heard. This is something I think we need to consider. Is limiting the autonomy of the individual members of UU one of the major themes of the Article 2 rewrite? Now I am thinking that we should be paying closer attention to all of the new words added to the values that emphasize the collective over the individual. I'm also seeing that the extra covenants are partly an attempt to restrict our autonomy as individuals. I see the same theme in the accountability statement. I think that statement is clearly an attempt to limit our individual prerogatives as members of UU. I think this theme partly explains why a caveat that justifies excluding people was added to the inclusion section. It seems like the removal of the commitment to individual freedom of belief is a direct dismantling of the freedoms of the individual. I do think I see a theme here, emphasizing the collective at the expense of the individual. And if you still aren't convinced that a major goal of the UUA is to de-emphasize the individual, I will remind you of what the Commission recommended in their first proposal, back in October of 2022. After spending 2 years thinking about this, their first proposal chose to leave out the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That is a direct erasure of individual freedoms in UU. Their first proposal also chose to leave out the democratic process. The UUA apparently didn't want any commitment to democracy in UU anymore. These were astounding choices. The fourth and fifth principles have been part of UU since the merger in 1961. There was apparently a lot of pushback, so the Commission spliced both of them back in. But the point is that this is a clear indication that the goal of the UUA is to emphasize the collective at the expense of the individual.
As I said earlier, the UUA wouldn't be proposing such a major change if it wasn't intended to have a major impact on all of UU. What's the big picture here?
It sure is confusing. We are told that UU needs a major transformation. But we are also assured that the UUA can't tell congregations what to do. These changes seem to be incompatible with congregational freedom.
I just realized something. We just got through reviewing all of the ways that the Article 2 rewrite is emphasizing the collective at the expense of the individual. But we need to focus a little more on the first word. The collective. The missing piece to the puzzle is right in plain sight. What we missed is the emphasis of the collective at the expense of the individual congregation. At the expense of congregational freedom.
Right in plain sight. The new overall covenant. A covenant congregation to congregation and through our association. I see it now. The question is not, will the UUA start telling congregations what to do? It was premature to fill in the blank. The question is, will congregations be told what to do by some governing body? And will congregations be told what their priorities are by some governing body?
When you explain it that way, I get a new understanding of one of the frequently asked questions the Article 2 Study Commission answered on their website. The question was, what do you mean by, we are accountable to one another? The answer was, in part, that the UUA Board of Trustees, the Article 2 Study Commission, and the UUA administration cannot impose covenants and commitments, or tell congregations or individuals what to do. My first reaction was, well, sure, not yet. Article 2 doesn't control that. The relationship between the congregations and the UUA is defined in a different place in the bylaws, in Article 3. Article 3 won't be rewritten until 2025 or 2026. But the very last line in the FAQ said, congregations, through their delegates, vote on what values they share and what they can agree to do together. That bears repeating. What they can agree to do together.
So I guess that's what's going to change. Right now, the congregations make their own decisions about what to do. It looks like the vision of the commission is that in the future, delegates to General Assembly would come to some agreement about what the agenda for all of UU would be. Then, to be accountable and to be in alignment with the new congregation-level covenants, the congregations would be obligated to do what was agreed to at General Assembly.
The congregations would no longer be autonomous, free to decide for themselves what their priorities are.
That's the piece we missed. We have two themes: limiting the autonomy of individual members and weakening the freedom of individual congregations to do as they see fit.
Maybe we shouldn't be so surprised. The Widening the Circle of Concern report had a lot of criticisms of congregational polity in UU. Polity is a word that means governance, or how we are governed. First of all, the instructions to the Commission on Institutional Change specifically wanted to have the distribution of power analyzed. Then, over and over again, congregational polity was identified as a big problem. Let me read just a couple lines. We need a congregational polity that serves us, rather than blocks progress. And it says congregations lack a covenantal understanding with one another and with the association. Then, congregations may not see a duty toward the association as a whole, especially when the association is acting as a change agent. The report seems to clearly be recommending a centralization of power and at the expense of congregational freedom and autonomy.
The autonomy of individuals is also strongly criticized in the Widening report. Over and over, it talks about there being too much emphasis on the individual in UU. I also think this is a telling statement. The report says covenant and commitment, not comfort, should be the binding fabrics of UU congregations and other communities. This seems to clearly be emphasizing the collective at the expense of the individual.
Be sure to watch Part 4, where we will look at the big picture, piecing together what the overall goal of the rewrite is. Deciding what UU is going to be about is in our hands. Now is the time to continue the conversation. Let's be wise and prudent caretakers of this religion.